Hello and welcome to this Info Security Magazine online summit session. It's Michael Hill here. I'm the editor of the magazine and I will be moderating this session, which is how to build and maintain a DevSecOps culture. And a big thank you goes out to Snyk for their sponsorship of this session. So just before I introduce and hand over to our speaker, I'll just run through a couple of the housekeeping points first. Regarding CPE credits, members of ISC Squared, ISACA and EC Council can qualify for half a credit based on an attendance time of 25 minutes. To do that, you will need to log in to your Info Security Magazine member account 48 hours after the session has been completed and then download your CPE certificate, which will have been generated if you have met the minimum attendance time. There are full instructions available to read and download in the FAQs and in the Info Security Magazine Resource Center within the live event. Also, for those of you on social media, we are tweeting along with all of our sessions on hashtag IMOS21. So please do feel free to join in the discussion on social media as well. Okay, delighted to introduce the speaker that we have joining us for this session. So delighted to have Patrick Dubois with us from Snyk. And just before I hand over to Patrick for his presentation, I'm going to open voting on our poll question, which is on your screen now. So we want to know, do you believe the DevOps team in your organization is empowered to scale up security? Is that A, yes, very much so, B, yes to some degree, C, no, or D, unsure? Going to open the voting on that one now. Very keen to get your thoughts on that, and we'll come back to the results of that question a bit later in the session. But now, moving on, going to hand over to Patrick for his presentation. So Patrick, over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Today we're going to talk about DevSecOps culture, and I want to thank Snyk. I work for them as an advisor to kind of like have me research this field. I've been there for about a year, kind of looking at how we can evaluate DevSecOps culture, and this talk kind of gets into the details of that. The way that I see it is a lot of people talk about friction points. Devs used to have friction point with ops. Now DevSecOps is the friction point of bringing security along in that. And those friction points, they have been addressed and more used over time. DevOps kind of pushed the developers to get closer to production. So, imagine that as the shift right. Agile pushed things down through the management to the team that we listen better to their requirements. The cloud has taught ops to move up kind of on the abstraction layer, and security comes now to the shift left in the whole perspective. So there's a lot of pressure building up on the team. By the way, most of these slides will have on the right hand bottom side a book where you can find, like on a specific slide, more details if you want to learn more about this. So this pressure is building up, and a lot of people are ultimately talking about autonomous teams, the teams that can work alone within the context of a company. And it's a very strange thing for many of them because the delegation of authority is kind of tricky. Do you have all the teams decide on their own security, on their own tooling? Usually there's somewhere, a balance that you have to find. But the idea that we're empowering the team to do what they think is right, because they are doing the work. That's kind of the principle. And that delegation of authority is what I think DevSecOps is doing from the security team to the team on the day-to-day operations. Like, what can we make them do autonomously there? So in one of the books, Frederic Laloux talks about the evolution that we've had over the years of culture in companies. We had a while ago the command and control, the power-centric, think about the castles, we defend everything in security. And then hierarchy, meritocracy is more about we're going to automate things like the factories, we're going to measure things, which is the scientific way. And more we want to evolve into this collaborative way, customer-centric, self-servicing way, and even the autonomous kind of working together. So all these phases, they make sense. And it is the reason why you will see different varieties of DevSecOps implementation. And what this book found is that it is a lot about the CEO and the culture of your company that will set the tone on what kind of areas that your DevSecOps kind of transformation will address. Will it be more about measuring? Will it be focusing more about collaboratively working? But in reality, they are all kind of important. You need to have the controls in place, you need to have the automation, you need the measurement, and you need the empowerment as well. And that's how you get to the autonomy. So you need to work on all of these layers at the same time. There's a website called DevOps Topologies where they kind of look at how these two groups of Dev and Ops blend together. And by looking at the diagram, you will see that there are different topologies that will exist. Like one has a shared overlap, one has a complete overlap, one is more has a temporary team that kind of like facilitates them in between them. So whatever you think about your journey, you kind of have to understand what your goal is or what type of topology will work in your company based on the cultural settings we saw on the previous slide. One is more effective than the other, but if you go against your company culture, then that is probably going to be an issue. So start with the one that is matching and then see how you can level up in the collaboration levels there as well. To interact with the teams, the book on team topologies, who kind of like came from that diagrams earlier on the previous slide, they talk about 3 interaction modes. The collaboration, which is the day-to-day human collaboration. They thought about X as a service, which is typically the self-servicing automation that a developer can use to secure or to scan their stuff. And then there's a facilitation by the platform team, by the central team, by the central security team that kind of helps them guide through this kind of collaboration. So if you're constructing how your teams overlap, you also have to look at how they will collaborate. And this is kind of a few of the ideas that you will get there to do. But ultimately, DevSecOps, if you think about it in the sense that they are empowering the teams to become better of security, it is a game of trust. And in the book, the little thin book of trust, they note 4 areas that are related to trust. Sincerity, do you mean what you're doing? Do you kind of like mean that they need to secure information that, you know, all the stuff that they need to be doing? The reliability, are you there every time a security issue is discussed? The competence about understanding all the training, all the information, all the knowledge you have to assess a security issue. And then the 4th area is, do you care? And you can do sincerity, reliability, and competence and not care. So it's not an easy thing. Most of the transformation I've seen start with the competence, but it will not be enough. Not just showing what security issues need to be solved and how security works is not enough. And it needs to come in both ways. And that's why I see the transformation of DevSecOps as the trust building up between both parties. The security people need to be there, and they kind of have to be reliable, have to be sincere what they do. They have to show competence. And then the team has to do it as well. And it's only when both of them kind of go in and start building the trust that this will work. A lot will start with just saying, well, it's a security team pushing through security. Again, command and control, you know, the red area that we discussed before, it will not be enough. You kind of have to balance between sincerity, competence, reliable, and care. And that made me to believe that even though a lot of people would say DevSecOps is about the culture, I do strongly agree that it's about the culture. But we're actually focusing on overcoming the friction created by previous silos. And those friction points, overcoming those friction points is DevSecOps. You will find a lot of plain good engineering practices in, you know, code hygiene, version control, and those parts, and they will be part of that journey, but you will look for those in kind of the engineering part. But the friction created from the humans and the work makes sense to overcome as well. So it's a tools and a cultural transformation at the same time, and both kind of influence each other in this journey. The way that I kind of started describing or evaluating these transformations is I looked through 4 areas. The one is the secure stack. What are we delivering? The code, the configs, is that part kind of secure? And then how we're delivering this. This is the secure delivery. Are my systems secure? The integrity of what I download, is that secure? So that's a different layer. And then there's a human layer or the process layer, where the typically security folks step into this and they kind of like pull in the governance over that security process. And then the fourth area is actually about empowering the team. And these four areas, they work together in a way, and I want them typically evaluated separately, because quite often you would see a transformation that only evaluates the secure stack, doesn't really take this delivery into account, doesn't look how the team can work into governance and keeps that as a security issue, and then doesn't work to empowering the teams. The security stack as such, you would think in the DevSecOps transformation that a lot of people are focused on everything that consists of code, the container, the cloud, the infra, even external services. That is what people code and build secure applications these days. But there's another area that developers typically integrate in their stack as well, which is what I call the security frameworks. User management, authentication, authorization, secret key management, API. They're typically related, but not written by the developer themselves, but they use frameworks to integrate with security services. And then when you take the next step, when you're building the app, you will be adding monitoring frameworks, error and exception frameworks, and logging frameworks. And I'm not saying the development team or the team has to run all the monitoring services. What I'm talking about here is that a modern app, you are able to monitor. The error and exception handling is in the app. Logging is correctly implemented by having the correct error codes available and all the context. And then there's the last part of the stack. There's the data, privacy, the licenses, what I call kind of more business-focused areas where the developer can handle. Do they encrypt them at the large level? Are there features that keep data private, and so on? For me, this is a broader view than the traditional view. You can start by the development and kind of go top to bottom code dependencies to all the way to external services. And then you can add things to that: security frameworks, operational frameworks, and business. And all of these areas will typically have their own maturity level that you can assess in those. So that gives you a kind of a step or a progression where you can spend your time. The next area is around the delivery. So is your code itself secure? Do you have scanners? Is the coding environment secure? And is the tool chain that you're building the code with secure? Again, that is the development kind of area, but you can see how it extends to the different environments of the CI and the test environment, like secure checking in artifacts, all the way to production, having secure deployment, doing the inventory, making sure things are logged in the CI environment, are logged in production, are monitored, and then the controls that need to be in place. So again, this gives you an overview of different areas that you can assess whether you are mature or not. You can start on the left and build your way all up to the right. Or if you have more of an ops-centric view, you can start on the right and start going to the left. The main purpose of these slides is to give you points of attention that you might have not considered that you need to be evaluating your security team on. And then there's this kind of area which is typically owned by the security people: vulnerability management, threat management, risk, and so on. I'm not going to read them all. But this is where the team or the application team actually hooks into the processes of the security team. For example, vulnerability management, yes, they create a policy, they report, and then the security team can help them assess. Threat management, you can do threat modeling in the team. So over time, the threat modeling isn't happening in security team, but the knowledge is put onto the team itself. Even, another example, supplier management. If the team just adds new tools and new features, new dependencies, you want them to report this back to the security team so they can be vetted. So there's a lot of overlap of kind of participating from the team to the security team. And usually it starts by creating awareness, and then it builds up by the team doing this autonomously. And then the fourth area is more how you kind of help this as a security team. And I've seen that it usually starts with the collaboration first. The security team should start sharing information, start sharing their worries, their insights, and the team immediately doesn't report back, but they take this input, and then they gradually kind of go over time. They start learning about the issues they have, and then they can start better collaboration and share better feedback and more insights. And as they are learning more, they can become accountable, because then they are gaining the trust of the security team, that they're leveling up in the learning and that they're collaborating on a more consistent base. And then ultimately they can become kind of authority of security, and they own that in their team. Does that mean everything can be decided by the team? Not, but it is kind of up to you to decide how much of the authority that the team gets also compared to other teams, and that the security team is offloaded for most of the decisions, and that can go into the team. So you need to probably start with the collaboration, move on to the learning, the accountability, and the authority. You can't just jump into the authority and say, go team, you have everything you to decide. It's now up to you. That usually doesn't end really well. And the assessment then is, in each of the four areas, is that you assess the stack by itself, the delivery process, the governance, and the empowerment. And they are not kind of completely separate dimensions, because if you get better at the stack and the delivery process gets more automated, then your governance becomes easier and more offloaded. And by that, the team gets empowered to kind of get better at things, and then they can improve again the stack. So there is a relationship, but the important thing is that you shouldn't go wild on one of those areas. You shouldn't only go, secure the delivery process, only secure the stack. You have to kind of level up almost like in a spiral way on all of these areas. And that's kind of one of the advice, because a lot of people are paralyzed, like, what should I do first? The stack is probably the easiest, then do some automation in the delivery, then on that kind of sets of governance with some policies, and then for that part, empower the team to get better at that time. And then you kind of have this kind of like circular improvement that you can kind of keep working on there. This was, in a nutshell, kind of my feedback on the culture process. I'd love to hear your feedback. We only have had like 20 minutes to kind of go this. So I realized I kind of glanced over a lot of the areas, but I'm sure Michael has now plenty of questions from the audience, and we can get some feedback, and I can answer some more detailed questions on them. So thank you for listening to me. You can find me on Twitter or send me an email if you want to get more information.
Fantastic. Thanks, Patrick. Really enjoyed that. Some great insights shared there. So I'm just going to drop our slides down now to reveal us both on screen. So hi, Patrick. Again, really fascinating presentation. Thoroughly enjoyed hearing your points made there. I've got a question for you before we have a look at the poll and take some of the audience questions, just based on what you've shared there. What do you see as the biggest or the most common challenges that organizations face in making a success of DevSecOps today?
It is usually the mindset that they go in with, we're just going to do this. We're going to set all the policies. We're going to have the security team build all the automation. And it just takes time. You can't rush it. And that is mainly due to the trust building that takes time. And that is kind of the misconception where you go in with a lot of good intentions, and the AppSec team is going in with, oh, we're building all this, we're doing this, and then it's like a startup. You build it and nobody comes. Damn, we needed to understand what they really want from the other side, what we can help them with. And that's kind of the reverse area. And that's typically what I've seen kind of go wrong initially, is that the focus is like, oh, we can do all this. Oh, what do they want? That's kind of the turning point in a lot of the aha moments.
Okay, great. And you mentioned there in your presentation kind of, silos playing a part as well. And, you can imagine modern organizations, very multifaceted, lots of different compartments, different moving parts. What's your advice for the organizations to best kind of break down those silos, particularly at the moment where everyone's working remotely? I can imagine, those silos almost become amplified and, are a bigger hurdle to get over when you're looking at DevSecOps.
It's almost like the threat modeling exercise seems to almost be like the TDD of coding. So threat modeling is like the security equivalent. And the reason why that is that you're focusing on the app that the current developer is working on. You're focusing on the security issues. You're walking into a room to do this together with the security team. And this seems to be one of the best exercises. Just start talking about what could go wrong in your application and doing this together. This is one tiny spot, but it shows you, developers are very passionate about their app and they're willing to improve and they're willing to learn. The security people are very passionate about, helping people to become secure. So that's the first step. And then usually the second bottleneck is to find the time and to have the permission to spend time on this. And that is a little bit trickier, but that is the role of management, to kind of like create some spare time to work on this, to improve this, to address these things. If management doesn't give you the time, all the rest is just a drop in the water, because it will pile up in the ticket system, in the known issue system, and so on. So that is having that conversation on prioritization and why it's not on the backlog, or why are you postponing this? Because if you ask the blatant question, is security important? Everybody will say, yes, of course, it's important. But do we do this first before a feature? That's usually another discussion. And having that discussion up front will save you time with the team, with the business owner, with the security folks. And that will usually get the ball rolling to understand what the priorities are of each of them as well.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Patrick. And just to have a look now at the results of our poll question, and some interesting findings that have come out of it. So we asked, do you believe the DevOps team in your organization is sufficiently empowered to scale up security? Top answer, 39%, was yes to some degree. That was followed by 31% who said no. Third answer, 15%, yes, very much so. Just 12% unsure. So, I mean, my math isn't the best, but we've got there, almost 55% almost saying either yes, very much so, or yes to some degree. So I guess that's quite a positive outcome. Would you have thought you would have seen those kind of figures, or would you have thought you'd seen something different to those, Patrick?
I think the interesting question would be, were it developers or were it security people who answered? Was it the team or the enabling people? They probably have like a different perspective on how much the empowerment and the authority is. And then maybe kind of what I try to convey in my slides, the extent, like, is it just the code? Is it going beyond the code? Is it also the security frameworks? Is it like where... Is it the vulnerability management? Is it the supplier management? There might be a lot of areas that haven't been covered yet, that they're still discovering. So it's a good positive sign that people are positive of the empowerment, but I always like to do the same exercise and have the same poll from the two different perspectives, like the one enabling and the one that uses the service, and whether they have the same feeling, yes or no.
Yeah, good point. We've got a couple of great questions come in here from our viewers. So we'll have a look at those. So one of them is, should the DevSecOps team sit within a SOC? In the instances where they are in a separate team, what are the key challenges for DevSecOps teams collaborating with a SOC team?
So if you make it a separate team, that is okay, as long as it's constantly kind of helping other teams. So what I've seen usually is that the DevSecOps team is kind of like the go-between. It's almost like a mediator between the SOC team, but it's not completely embedded. They fall a little bit outside. But as I mentioned in my topologies, it depends a little bit on how your company is structured and what your culture is. If the team feels that there are a lot of issues, then they might stay closer to the SOC and that there's immediately reaction. If it's a more kind of like normal situation, then they might be more on the delivery of the projects and kind of enabling and onboarding teams. So it depends a little bit on where you want to have that team kind of work on. Is it more on like what's happening in production or what's happening in the teams? And they probably have to spread themselves a little bit. The shift left mentality is to go into the application teams as early as possible, but it is not enough. So you do need to spend some time in the operational world as well. But from what I've seen, it's not happening that much. Most of the DevSecOps team, I've seen it first going to the dev part and the application part, and then they branch out back to the operational side. Because on the diagram, it expands their view of the team again, and then they come closer to the operational side.
Okay. Yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Patrick. And just a second question we've got here. Do you see the need to evolve any traditional security approaches to better embed and stick to DevSecOps cultures? It's quite an interesting one.
There is an example that I bring up. So I'm saying the old days, I'm old, but people, when they touch certain files in production that could only be touched by a few people, they would have to ask permission first to 4 or 5 people before changing this. And this is a tedious kind of process of asking all the permission. Now, imagine you have to do this when you're in the middle of the night and you're trying to solve an incident. You need to change the config of something, and it's like really important. You can't reach those other 3, 4 people. So what do? I think the mentality shift that we want to go for is that we want to make sure that the people are trained well enough that we trust them to make that judgment call, but that security will become notified and are kept transparently in the loop what has happened. I'm not saying this is the solution, for all cases. It depends on your legislation or like what you have to do. But this is the flipping point. Like, do you trust the people who are doing the work? Have you empowered them enough to kind of trust their own decisions if they are certain about this? I'm not saying they have to go in like a cowboy and just, write all the files. But if they're 100% certain and they don't need a second opinion, and this is just more of informative, that is where we are wanting to aim for. And that is the flip, I think, in control versus, empowering the people to do the right thing, but still maintaining the visibility of what has been going on. But without first going through the education and having the calibration, you're not going to build that authority overnight.
Okay, fantastic. And just we're rapidly running out of time, but maybe just a last kind of key takeaway from you, Patrick, is what do you predict is going to be the key trend for DevSecOps for the next year, 2 years, and what do you think we're going to be seeing across organizations?
I'm hoping that we're leveling up, and we're not seeing DevSecOps as the AppSec problem only anymore. but we're expanding it and that developers take ownership for running the things in production. So I kind of hope that we're getting to a model where it's like you build it, you run it, you secure it in that environment, and that we're not just looking at AppSec, we're building the app, and then in production, you're on your own. So that we kind of actually make the DevSec to the ops transition as well.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Patrick. Really great points made there. I'm going to have to look to wrap things up, but thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you, and thanks for the presentation. Really great stuff as well. A big thank you, obviously, to Snyk as well for their sponsorship of this session, and in bringing this session to a close. So to ends day one of the InfoSecurity Magazine Online Summit. So a huge thank you to everyone that joined us today and took part. Obviously, a big thank you to all of our sponsors for the day too. Hope you enjoyed all the sessions and you got to see as much as you were able to. Remember that all sessions will be available to watch back on demand on the InfoSecurity website very soon. So if you missed anything or if you just want to take it in again, you can do. Please do also check out our resource center if you haven't already. There's lots of white papers in there, reports, webinars and things that you can download and enjoy. So make sure you do check that out. And you can also continue to network with your peers in our networking area too. We'll be back tomorrow for day 2 of the online summit, which is our North America focused day. We'll be kicking off slightly later UK or EMEA time, so we're kicking off tomorrow at 10:45 EDT, which is obviously 14:45 GMT, but not too late. So hopefully, plenty of you can join us for some sessions tomorrow as well. Without further ado, we'll say a big thank you to everyone for joining us, and we will bring this session and day 1 to a close there. So thank you very much.
Bye.